Hello and welcome to Tyler Talks, and this is what I watched in April 2021. I started off the month watching the new Godzilla vs. Kong, and it is fine. If you're a big fan of the Godzilla new MonsterVerse kind of stuff, then you're probably going to end up liking this one. This one to me feels like the worst entry out of the Godzilla King Monsters, Kong Skull Island bunch, where really the movie feels like it's missing a second act. I think was my biggest detriment of it. Godzilla and Kong only kind of fight a few times, and then a new big villain's introduced at the end. It's not really a big spoiler or anything, but the movie kind of recognizes what type of genre it is more than anything, and almost incredibly just cuts out all of the acting and all of the human characters entirely in favor of a few big monster battles. This is also the one movie out of I think this entire bunch that I would have really loved to watch in theaters, because at home watching on my TV, the spectacle of watching a giant monster lizard fight a giant monkey is kind of a little bit lost on a smaller TV, and on a big screen I probably would have liked this a little bit more, but where it stands now, it's probably the weakest entry. I like the Godzilla and Kong stuff. I think there's actually some really great interesting shots of Hong Kong by director Adam Wingard, who made one of my favorite movies of 2010, The Guest. Again, I don't think this movie's super great, but I can understand why people like it, and I'm not going to penalize it too much because I recognize what type of genre it is, and the movie itself recognizes that. And then I went and watched Spotlight, 2015's Best Picture Oscar winner, and I must say, for some reason, I've watched this movie 3 times in the past year, and it just gets better each time. It's not a perfect movie by any means, and I feel like it misses a lot of that rhythm that The Social Network has, because I feel like they're trying to go for similar things, but this is just one of those movies that is solid. Everything about it is well made, well acted, well produced. It doesn't stand out in a lot of different areas, but you watch it and leave going, yeah, that was a really good movie, and I can see myself watching that again. For some reason, this has become like my weird comfort movie, where it's a movie I recognize is going to be high quality, and then I'm going to get like a productive kind of time out of it regardless. But everything about this is just good. I can see why it won Best Picture in 2015. I can see why it's highly regarded. It's like across the board, like a 4 out of 5 movie. It's good, but not great, but there's nothing bad about it. It's that really weird case of missing that one special element, and I don't know how to fix it, but I really enjoy it, and for some reason I've watched it 3 times now this year. Then I went and watched 1985's To Live and Die in LA, directed by William Friedkin, who you may know as the director of The Exorcist, or Sorcerer, or The French Connection, I believe. I may be wrong on that, but this is just kind of a big, fun, weird cop movie. I'm a big fan of those 80s cop dramas for some reason. To me, they're just a fun time, regardless of if they're terrible or if they're really good. But this one definitely stands above for its treatment of LA itself as this hot and grimy environment with characters who are doing no matter what they can to kind of get revenge. It's grimy, it's gross, and it's incredibly well directed, with excellent performances by William Peterson and excellent directing by William Friedkin, as well as a kick-ass score to go along with the 80s. It's hot, it's disgusting, and it has vibrant, bright orange colors that just make everything feel more saturated and more gross and lived in. And it captures a side of LA that you don't often see in movies from the 80s, because LA is often treated with this kind of like sign of respect-ish, sort of. But this one really takes it full force and like shows like the industrial aspects of it. And it also has one of the best car chase sequences I've ever seen. It's downright incredible, and it's a bundle of fun. And it has one of the more surprising endings that I've actually ever seen. And I really respect this movie. And the more I watch William Friedkin movies, the more he becomes one of these weird directors who made like 4 or 5 incredible movies, and then that's it. Really love it. If you're a fan of 80s cop dramas, I think you'll like this one a lot. Then I watched The Last Boy Scout, directed by Tony Scott and written by Shane Black, which I actually didn't know about it until I finished the movie and looked up who the heck wrote it. The Last Boy Scout is a 1991 movie starring Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans Jr. It's another buddy cop genre movie, but this time it takes a far more like cynical and humorous and like biting satirical approach to the genre. Bruce Willis is just a wisecracking asshole the entire movie, and it's incredibly charming. And I was watching this and thinking, holy cow, this is so well written. This is really funny. Who the heck wrote it? And then after finding out it was Shane Black, that makes a lot of sense. This isn't really well reviewed, which is kind of a baffling thing to find out about this movie, because it's fun, it's exciting, it's well directed. Tony Scott is known for his visceral and exciting action scenes, and it's ultimately just one of those movies that seems to have been lost to time. But for some reason, mainly it might be that I'm like a biting nihilist, or maybe it's just the sign of the times, but this movie felt very fitting for the year we're having right now, where it's just sour and angry and mean, and it's filled with just a lot of great one-liners that are humorous and also just have a lot of rewatchability. This movie I can see myself watching a few different times, and I'm really excited I checked it out. This is like my first official certified recommendation. If you've never heard about this movie, go watch it. I believe it's on HBO Max right now. I could be wrong on that. It may have left. But ultimately, this is just a really fun movie with really solid chemistry and really solid directing. Then I watched 2014's Before You Go, which is Chris Evans' directorial debut. I'm a big sucker for romantic comedies. Romantic comedies and action movies, if you already couldn't tell, are my two genres of movies that I'm always going to be more lenient towards. And Before You Go is actually not a bad directorial debut. Chris Evans clearly has a passion for people and how people view the environment and how the environment itself dictates relationships and dictates people in their development. And Chris Evans clearly has an eye for this kind of stuff, and it's something I wish he would do more of. By all accounts, this is his only directing feature, and he clearly has like a talent in some regards. This movie isn't great by any means. Chris Evans is pretty good, and it is a little cliche at times, but the big detriment to it is Alice Eve is kind of like very miscast in this movie. She just does not pair well with Chris Evans, and her performance isn't great at all. But there's a lot of like very beautiful shots and use of handheld cams and use of city lights to increase the environment, to increase the setting, to really dictate the relationship between the characters in the setting. It's set within one night in New York, and I'm a big fan of these type of movies. Chris Evans was also clearly inspired by Before Sunrise, and that much is evident in the way the characters talk about life and philosophy and relationships and really everything. It's fun, it's not great, but it's a fun time, and honestly, I'd recommend more people check this one out. Then I rewatched 2011's Crazy Stupid Love. Again, I'm a big fan of romantic comedies, and this one's just one of the best ones of the 2010s. It's basically breaking every single genre cliche and subverting it in terms of a more exciting and more well-developed characters. I was surprised at how funny this movie is and how well-developed the characters were. I hadn't seen this movie since it came out in 2011, but rewatching it now, I kind of respect it a lot more than I thought I would. It's really just well made and fun, and it's paced incredibly well, despite the fact that it's around 2 hours long, or maybe a little bit under that. Ryan Gosling, Steve Carell have excellent chemistry, and it has one of the more interesting endings of a movie I've seen in recent memory. And it really does work to build on those genre cliches and subvert them, and I have to really respect a movie for that. Then I watched 2002's Bourne Identity. I actually rewatched this one. I've seen it a few times in my life. It's been a few years since I've watched it, but it's directed by Doug Liman. It stars Matt Damon. This is basically what propelled Matt Damon into an action star. It was his transition from like the Good Will Hunting Matt Damon to the Jason Bourne Matt Damon. And it's good. It definitely doesn't hold up as well as I thought it would after a few years of not watching it. It's exciting, it's well made, but there definitely does seem to be something aged about it. I don't want to cast this movie off in any regards because I think it does have ultimately like a lot of value in terms of its kind of like mid-2000s action movies. It definitely stands above, but there's something that feels like this movie is constantly waiting for a sequel. And maybe again, this is my influence of being heavily like not inspired. Maybe this is my influence of growing up around like the Marvel era where each movie leads into another one, but I couldn't help feel like this movie was just building up for something else. Well, not entirely building on its own narrative. I wish there was a more time spent with Matt Damon discovering stuff out about who he was. I do think there's like a really excellent pace to this, and Doug Liman does have a good natural sense of how to create chaotic but controlled action. Ultimately, though, it's one that I think might be eclipsed by its sequels. I think Bourne Supremacy and Bourne Ultimatum are better movies, and this might just be a case of me being influenced by the current movie climate of today, where I just wasn't as into this as I thought I was. Then I watched 2010's Unstoppable. I actually rewatched this movie. I'm kind of on a little bit of a Tony Scott kick right now, but I love movies that are ultimately just one sentence, the train goes fast and we have to stop it, and that's it. Tony Scott is a master in recognizing the type of movie genre that he's working under and doesn't really work to kind of create anything else, which sounds like a detriment on it, but Tony Scott is a master of the action thriller genre and how to create a narrative that is fast-paced, it's compelling with well-developed enough characters that make everything kind of grander and more engaging and something that you can kind of gravitate towards. It also helps that Denzel Washington and Chris Pine are leading this movie as two train conductors who are trying to stop a moving train. It's just like a mastery of this type of genre. It doesn't try to be anything else. It just recognizes what type of movie it is and works within that. Tony Scott's also a master of kind of creating trains to be bigger and more monstrous than they really are, because there's nothing like inherently terrifying about the size of trains, but they are these like monstrous sized things, and Tony Scott shoots them in a way that they feel like a living, breathing, terrifying monster that's out of control. It's fun, it's exciting, it's short, it's well paced, it's well acted, it's well directed. This is just one of those movies you sit back and you go, yeah, I'm glad I watched that. That's a fun time. Then I finally got around to watching 1986 Top Gun. I am a massive Tom Cruise fan. Tom Cruise is one of my favorite actors working today, and for some reason, Top Gun has always been a blind spot, and I have never been more utterly confounded by a movie in my life before. Top Gun is the most bewildering and tonally inconsistent movie I have ever seen. That's a little bit of a hyperbole, but I can't. It's been 2 weeks since I've seen this movie, and I can't express how just taken aback I am by it. It's tonally inconsistent by going from humorous to like downright like serious and grave in the matter of seconds. It's incredibly military propaganda, but at the same time it seems like makes the military seem cool, but also does it criticize the people within it? Maverick is not a likable character. Iceman is, but Iceman's sort of the villain for the majority of it. It also is like, is that a criticism of the military itself? It's a weird movie, and I don't know. Again, I was not born when this movie came out, and I know that there were like military recruitment like centers right outside the theaters when this came out, and I'm so confounded. I don't get this movie. It's fun. I'd recommend it. It makes no sense. At the end, the villain is just another plane, and it's never like specified. It's like weird socio like political commentary on something. It doesn't make any sense, but I'm kind of in love with it, but I'm also not. It's a weird movie, and I don't know how else to express it. Then I watched 2013's Begin Again, directed by John Carney, who did Once and who did Sing Street. This is his movie in the middle, and it's honestly probably his most forgotten about. John Carney is a musician who also kind of directs and writes movies, who incorporates music into narratives and storytelling. And Begin Again is one of the best movies of 2010s. It's also one of the most forgotten and underrated movies of the 2010s. It stars Mark Ruffalo and Keira Knightley, even Adam Levine, Haley Steinfeld. It's an excellent movie that utilizes music to tell narratives and to tell stories. It also uses music to tell the relationships and dynamics between characters. It's shot handheld. It's shot in New York City. But ultimately, it's a movie just about the relationships between people and their influences and how music can guide and help people develop. It's downright amazing. I really am speaking highly of this movie because I think it's that incredible. I think everyone should go check this one out. This is one of those rare movies that just kind of works on every single level. It's paced well, it's acted well, it's directed well. The shots are surprisingly shot really well. There's nothing like spectacular about it, but there's something very natural and personal about the handheld kind of camera movements between people and the dynamics between people. It's really just one of those movies that's my comfort movie, that it ends and I feel like I just accomplished something and that I feel like I just spent my time wisely. I've seen this movie like 6 or 7 times now in my life, and it's one of the best movies of 2010s. If you haven't watched it already, or if you haven't checked out any of John Carney's filmography, because Once and Sing Street are also excellent movies, I think you'd really like this one. I'm a big fan. I'd highly recommend you go check this one out. Then I watched 2021's Nobody, starring Bob Odenkirk, and it's a lot of fun. It's crazy. It's wacky. The first half of the movie is basically like a not as interesting John Wick. But the second half goes, yeah, screw it, screw realism. We're going to have the time of our life, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Again, I'm a big fan of action movies, and this feels like the big first indicator of a post-John Wick era, where movies are taking kind of like these older action stars and creating a fun, well-made, well-directed action movie. It's just surprisingly effective and fun, and if anyone hasn't seen this already, go check it out. It's not even 90 minutes, I don't think, which means it's paced well, it's acted well, it's shot well, it's creative, it's fun, it uses its violence as a narrative propellant, and I think Bob Odenkirk's downright excellent in this movie. I'm a big fan of it. If you haven't already, go check it out. Then I watched 1984 Beverly Hills Cop, starring Eddie Murphy, and this is the movie that made me wish I could have seen Eddie Murphy in his prime, because now my generation kind of sees Eddie Murphy as this like past his prime, washed up like comedian, despite the fact that clearly in 1984 he is one of the biggest stars on the planet and one of the best comedians on the planet. I know most of this movie was ad-libbed, which just makes it even more incredible that it was nominated for Best Screenplay, because that means that Eddie Murphy's ad-libs were nominated for Best Screenplay. It's legitimately funny, which is a hard thing to do because movies, I feel like my generation views humor in a different way. And watching a movie from the 80s, you can recognize that it's humorous, but sometimes it can be difficult to find things funny. Which is an interesting classification, but this movie had me laughing a lot, and I was surprised at how much I actually enjoyed watching this movie. It's a classic for a reason. If you haven't seen this already, which for some reason was a mistake on my part, go check it out. If you're a big fan of Eddie Murphy, I think you'd love this movie. I think it's one of the funniest cop movies of the 80s. And I think if you are a big fan of watching kind of Eddie Murphy's career, it's 48 Hours, Beverly Hills Cop, and all his SNL stuff, and I think it's a really solid progression. I'm a big fan of this movie. I'm excited to check out Beverly Hills Cop 2, which is directed by Tony Scott, and I heard 3 is kind of a little iffy, but, Eddie Murphy is Eddie Murphy. He's a star for a reason, and he was a star for a reason, I should say. Go check this one out if you haven't already. Then I watched 2019 Godzilla King of Monsters. I have a younger brother who wanted to watch this movie, so I decided to check it out again. I saw it in theaters when it came out, and it was fun. It's not super great. I'm a big fan of Edwards' 2014 Godzilla, and I want to make a video about that at some other point. But this movie just kind of is like, yeah, monsters are going to fight, and humans are kind of bleh, and we're just going to make the monsters fighting look cool. And within that genre, it's pretty good. It's pretty effective. Godzilla fighting King Ghidorah and Rodan and Mothra, it's just cool. And Boston gets nuked, and I thought that was pretty awesome too. But basically, it's just a fun monster movie. It's not special, it's not good, it's not technically bad. It's just a blockbuster, and it's a modern blockbuster with an emphasis on the effects instead of characters. Some of the shots are actually downright gorgeous, and I think there's actually a lot of effective use of camera movements and set design to create the scale of the monsters. And I was a moderate fan of this. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's bad. I think it's just the right movie within its genre. Then I watched the new Mortal Kombat movie in 2021, and I watched this with Matt and Mark. We watched it over Discord, and it's one of the worst movies I've seen in a long time. It's just bad. It has bad effects, bad acting, bad pacing, bad scripts, bad everything. I'm not a Mortal Kombat fan, so that could have absolutely hampered everything, but I also don't know how this movie survives off references itself, because even the references that I know weren't that effective. I think this is just one of those movies that might be clouded by the atmosphere that is video game movies are just not as good, and when people watch one that might click more, it ultimately just kind of is, they gravitate to that a little bit more. I did not enjoy this at all. I think it's really bad. I'm not one to cast off movies that much, but I also just think this one's really bad. I would not recommend you watch this one. If you're a Mortal Kombat fan, sure. But the main character isn't a Mortal Kombat character, and he's not a well-developed character, and things don't make sense, and things aren't structured or told well. And I think the narrative's just really bad in this. And it's also a movie setting up a sequel, and I'm not a big fan of that. It doesn't really seem to concern itself with the now, but rather the later. And it's just not good. I wouldn't recommend this. I know I just said I'm not one to cast off movies, but I just rewatched 2014's Amazing Spider-Man 2, and it's not good. That's just how it is. I mean, Andrew Garfield's fun, and the movie recognizes that it's trying to do a bunch of different things, but it's very clearly, based on what we know about it, plagued by a lot of stuff going behind the scenes with Sony and the inclusions of a bunch of different stuff. I don't mind Jamie Foxx in this movie. I don't really get a lot of the hate from him. I think he's perfectly campy. The movie's just not good. It's not really paced well. It's not really acted well. It's kind of a little bit too comedic at times, which for the story is fine, but Dane DeHaan's in it, and I love Dane DeHaan. Dane DeHaan's my guy, because I love Chronicle, and oh man, I love Dane DeHaan. But Dane DeHaan's just not good in this movie. The chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone even feels a little bit off, and it feels like it's a movie attempting to set up other stuff, which it is, but it's also a movie attempting to rewrite the first Amazing Spider-Man. It's kind of one of those Spider-Man movies that's going to be lost to time, and no one really cares about it. It's the joke of basically movie discourse, and it's well deserved. It's fine. I don't think I'll ever watch it again. Then I watched 1997's Happy Together, directed by Wong Kar-wai, and I'm a big Wong Kar-wai fan, and this movie's excellent. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil too much, but I definitely have to look a lot of the political aspects going on at the time, because Wong Kar-wai was clearly influenced by a lot of different stuff, and because of that, it made my first watch through not as good as I wanted to, because there's definitely a lot of stuff you're watching it and you're like, something's going over my head, and I don't know why. There's clearly influences happening around the world, and despite the fact that the movie is shot incredibly well with excellent uses of green and red colors to dictate emotions and the relationships between characters, with excellent set designs, excellent acting, excellent development of relationships, and it's just one of those movies that I'm going to have to watch a few times to fully kind of appreciate, and I don't feel like that's a detriment on the movie, but a detriment on myself as a watcher. Then I went and watched Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, but not the 70s one, the 2009 remake with Denzel Washington and John Travolta, directed by Tony Scott. And I don't get why people hate this movie. This movie's so much fun. It's fun. It's exciting. John Travolta is just off his rockers this entire movie. It's just like, it's a movie that's average, that's elevated by great performances and some really solid directing. I don't get the hate from it. I get there's a better 1970s remake of it, but I don't care. Had a fun blast with this movie. I'm a big Tony Scott fan. I'm a big action movie fan. And for me, I just watched it going, this is fun, and I had fun, and I'm glad I watched it. Then I ended the month with 2021's Without Remorse, starring Michael B. Jordan, and it's not good. It's just not a good movie. It's weird. It's not really well shot. Michael B. Jordan is basically carrying this thing on his back, and even he can't really save this that well. The narrative isn't super clear. The characters and the relationships aren't super clear. I don't even think the action's that good. But ultimately, it feels like a movie with a lot of missed opportunities to tell a very compelling and interesting story. It's basically just a story about revenge with some weird, like, political aspects to it that are undeveloped. The relationships between characters aren't well developed. Characters are often thrown in and then killed, and you're supposed to feel something, but you really aren't. There's just a lot of weird stuff with this, and I don't really recommend it, even though I'm a massive Michael B. Jordan fan. This isn't the type of property and stuff that I want to see him attached to. I want to see him actually being a good actor. And in this one, he's trying his best, but everything else is weighing him down. I wouldn't recommend it. I'd just kind of skip it if I were you. So that's everything that I watched in April of 2021. As you can see, I have a really weird movie taste. I like a lot of different stuff. This isn't a normal month. I had a lot of stuff going on with work and with finishing up grad school. And as you can see, I wasn't in the mood for super challenging movies, so I watched a lot of action, a lot of romantic comedies. Basically stuff where I'm like, I have 2 hours to kill. I'm going to put on something light. And that was really this month. More standard months, I have other movies and different movies that I'd be able to recommend that you guys may not have heard of. But if there's anything here that you want to recommend, or that you disagree with, or that you agree with, or anything you want me to check out, leave it in the comment section down below. I love learning about new movies. I love talking about movies. I love really everything like that. And again, I like making my videos discussion platforms. So if there's anything you even disagree with and you want to fight me on, go for it. Let's have a brawl. I'm ready to die for Begin Again. But also, make sure you check out Matt and Mark's channel. Matt published a new video. I don't know what his new video will be by the time I upload this, so whichever one I put right here. Also check out Mark's channel. Also check out our podcast, which we'll be going to soon. And thank you guys for watching. I'll see you again soon.